The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. When the days for Jesus being taken up were fulfilled, he resolutely determined to journey to Jerusalem. And he sent messengers ahead of him. On the way, they entered a Samaritan village to prepare for his reception there, but they would not welcome him because the destination of his journey was Jerusalem. When the disciples, James and John, saw this, they asked, "Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to consume them?" And Jesus turned and rebuked them. And they journeyed to another village. As they were proceeding on their journey, someone said to him, "I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus answered him, "Foxes have dens, and birds of the sky have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to rest his head." And to another he said, "Follow me." But he replied, "Lord, let me go first and bury my father." But he answered him, "Let the dead bury their dead. But you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God." And another said, "I will follow you, Lord, but first let me say farewell to my family at home." To him Jesus said, "No one who sets a hand to the plow, looks to what was left behind, and looks to what was left behind, is fit for the kingdom of God." The Gospel of the Lord. I'm going to try to use the power of amplification that God gave me, since there seems to be a few glitches in the system here. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. All right. The call of Jesus is very clear in all of these readings. And the call of Jesus is that if we are going to follow him, we have to follow him wholeheartedly. Not just come occasionally, even if that occasionally is for a half hour a day, to appease him and then be about our own business. What Jesus makes very clear to us is that following him has to be at the heart of our business. We have to take on his yoke wholeheartedly and allow him and his Spirit to guide us. Now, we often neglect the second reading, but I believe that in particular, St. Paul's letter to the Galatians has a very, very special message for us who are seeking to follow Jesus. And that is this. A little background. The Galatians were not a group of people who were living in a particular large, well-known city, like all of the others, the Philippians, Thessalonians, Ephesians, and so on. They all lived, Corinthians, they all lived in major population centers. The Galatians were scattered in a bunch of small villages around what is now central Turkey. And they were kind of foreigners. Actually, this may be of interest, and I'm sure some of you know this, the Galatians were Irish. They were. because they were Celts. And coming from somewhere in Central or Eastern Europe, they migrated all over the place. Galatia is a word that is related to the word Celt, as is Galicia, and a few other, Gaul even. All signify that these folks had a common origin. So, St. Paul's letter to the Galatians is truly the letter to the Irish. Now, these folks were kind of shunned by the Greeks and the others who were around there. And the interesting thing is Paul never set out to visit them. He visited them by accident because he got sick, and they cared for him. The other interesting thing is there was never a Jewish community there. If you'll remember, Paul always went first to the synagogues in those various cities, in the diaspora. And when his message fell on deaf ears very often, then he brought the message to people who were not Jewish, and they received it wholeheartedly. Here he had what we might call virgin territory, because they didn't have to deal with their own Jewishness as kind of a baggage to try to fit Jesus into. Paul could start from scratch. And basically, what he said to them was, we have good news. God has manifested himself fully and completely in Jesus Christ to draw all people to himself. And they received that with joy. Then when Paul left them, Judaizers came. Those were Christians who were also Jewish. And they said, you know, it's important to follow Jesus. But in order to follow Jesus and to be saved, you've got to become Jewish first. You've got to take on the whole burden of the Jewish law, and then you can follow Jesus. St. Paul wrote back to them when he heard about this and said, you idiots. No. In Jesus is contained all of the freedom of the children of God. Don't go back to slavery. Don't, whatever form that slavery might take. But he also warned that one form of slavery is that we can be slaves to our own interests, our own desires, our own ways of looking at things, and see everything else, including Jesus, only by our own desires, our own lights. And he said, you know, what real freedom is not the freedom to be yourself. Real freedom is to be Christ for others. And so when we're thinking about freedom, when we're thinking about the call of Jesus Christ, it is to freedom, but not, oh, thank God I'm free now, I can do anything I want to. No, it's, thank God I'm free now, there is no hindrance for me to be Christ for you. And so let's think about freedom in those terms. How freedom affects our relationship with others to be Christ for them.